Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to my seminar. Thank you, Nancy, for facilitating it with me. Hello.
For sure.
So today we're going to be talking about anger management and how to regain control of anger in our lives. And my name is Janel. I don't know if I said that already. I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying, and I'll just be leading you through how to regain the control of anger in your life. Two, what is anger? So anger is a negative feeling state that is typically associated with hostile thoughts, physiological arousal, and maladaptive behaviors. It usually develops in the response to the unwanted actions of another person who is perceived to be disrespectful or demeaning, threatening, or neglectful. And that's from the APA from 2012. So the simple fact is that we in the modern Western society aren't too in touch with our emotions. All too often, we're guided by the stiff upper lip, right? So we got to be stern, we have to be serious, that type of mentality. And we tend to repress our feelings. We stuff our emotions down deep inside until finally we can't take it anymore. And we decide, we're going to explode, or we just explode, right? It's not a decision, it just happens. Anger is a perfectly normal human emotion, right? So why would we aim to understand anger, right? Because it's a normal human emotion. In fact, it can be healthy, alerting us to problems in our lives and relationship. It can prompt us to make positive change to ourselves, to our loved ones, or even to the world that we live in, right? So, but that's only if the anger is controlled and directed in a positive fashion, right? So if anger is just let out on the loose, it's not going to be very beneficial to us and those around us. But if we're able to hone that in, it is able to be productive in a certain way. It can be difficult to handle our anger, though if we don't understand it, and if we don't even have the language to describe what or how we feel, this is why learning how to differentiate between the different types of anger is so important, right? Because once we can name our anger type, then we can start to claim it and we can start to tame it, right? We can start to tame our anger. So why would we aim to understand our anger? Like I said before, right? To make sure that the repressed emotions don't lead to explosions, to normalize anger and ways that it can be healthily expressed instead of unhealthy ways, right? Learning to identify and control the emotion, right? So once we learn to identify it, then we have a little bit more control over it to be able to say, okay, this is how I'm going to manage it moving forward. Number 3.
Yeah, Janelle, sir, I just wanted to jump in and mention that, those are all great points. Especially also to recognize that everyone deals with things differently. And for some, repressing the emotions can come up as anger and behavior when triggered. And for others, it can look different. So maybe, being quiet and reserved, or some people refer to journaling, so everyone is different. And like you said, normalizing anger and understanding that it's an emotion, right? It's a valid emotion. And yes, definitely understanding why we're feeling that way and how to communicate it. So yeah.
Yes, thank you for that piece. I really like the part you said about the subjectivity of anger, right? The fact that we're all going to experience it so differently, right? The way I experience it, the way you experience it is going to be so different. So for us to even understand what exactly we're trying to tame, we have to see how it's being reflected from us, right? How is it being demonstrated through us, right? Then we can start to name that, okay, that's anger, and that's what it looks like specifically for me. Thank you for that, Nancy.
All right, no worries.
Okay, number 3, anger as unmet needs. So The feelings of anger, it's kind of a signal to us, right? It's a signal that there might be an unmet need somewhere in our lives, right? It could be something from childhood. It could be an unmet need in your relationship or something within yourself, right? You might have goals for your life and there's something that's not being satisfied inside of you, right? So that can light a fire inside of you and ignite your anger. So acknowledging someone's feeling is a beautiful gift. So saying, I can see, how sad you are, or this is a really painful, isn't it? Or caring and being empathetic in your response, right? What's helpful, however, is knowing that empathy does not end there, a deeper recognition that each of us has unmet needs and moves us towards into a more compassionate response, right? So not only thinking about your needs and what are my unmet needs, but also how are my unmet needs reacting to others, right? Because we have to be able to take perspective and look at other people's situation as well, right? That's also important. So some of the needs that you might start to think about or consider, right? Feel free to look that up on the internet or reflect back on this presentation if you want, to kind of see like which one of these needs are being met for me right now, and is this igniting any maladaptive behaviors or emotions inside of me, right? So when we look at things such as safety, right? Am I safe? Do I have a home where I feel, or an area or a family where I feel safe in, right? Do I have connection? Do I have meaningful friendships? Do I have a meaningful relationship if that's something that I aspire for to be in, right? Touch, is that my love language? Is that something that I am receiving, right? For each person, like Nancy said, it's going to be very specific. It's going to be person to person based, but it's important that you go through this list and think about, what does this mean to me? How much do I value this? And is that being met, right? It's very important that it's being met. And if it's not being met by someone in your life, I wouldn't say to start blaming that person, right? This is a perfect time to self-reflect and think, how can I have this need met, right? Is it something that I can meet for myself? Most importantly, right? We want to meet them ourselves. And if I can't, where's an area I can go, right? When we talk about something like connection, right? Where's somewhere I can go to have this need met for me, right? Maybe I'm not around the right circle of friends. Maybe I need to create a new version of what family means to me, right? To meet that need. All right, so some other ones might be affection, respect, being heard, presence, imagination, creativity, movement, freedom, being valued, appreciated, empathy, recognition, relaxation, shared respect and responsibility, and love, right? These are all things that we all thrive for, that we all want, and some more than others. So that's what I'm saying, making sure that I know what my needs are and how are those being met based on how much I value them. That's very important. Okay, next one. Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in again with you, Janelle.
Yeah,
And just the piece that stood out most for me there was the self-awareness, right? The self-awareness piece, and being able to identify, what you're feeling in that moment, not just what you're feeling, but what you're missing. And recognizing that void, and also finding solutions to fill that void. So as you mentioned, whether it be communication, or paying attention to your circle, paying attention to your social supports, when you express yourself to others, are they hearing you? Are they valuing you? So I think those are just very important pieces that you brought up there.
Yeah, thank you for that addition there about communication. Yes, that's also important, right? Are your needs being communicated, right? The extent of moving somewhere else is kind of like, I've been communicating it for a while and it's not being heard. So instead of blaming yourself, I'm going to move somewhere else. But that's a good piece as well, right? Did I communicate my needs, right? Was this something that I even said to my partner or to my mom, that I have this unmet need, right? Making sure that we're communicating that. Thank you, Nancy.
All right.
Okay, passive anger versus volatile anger, right? So based on the pictures that we're looking at, or looking at these pictures, we can kind of see the difference between the two angers, right? So one is kind of the more silent, being petty, with the girl with her back turned from her husband and his back turned, but there's not really any vocalization of what exactly the issue is. And then completely on the other spectrum, the other couple, the person is screaming and the girl is covering her ear, like she doesn't really want to hear what's going on, right? This one's more of a grand explosion, a loud and clear type of anger, right? It's more in your face, rather than passive. So passive anger this is an anger that doesn't express itself as anger. Instead, it seeps out in little ways, such as sarcastic comments or acts of unconscious aggression against the person you're mad at, such as forgetting to fill your car with gas when you know your husband won't have enough time to make it to work the next day. Or it can also look like, it can also be directed internally. And this is especially true if you have repressed your anger so much you don't even know you're angry. You simply may find yourself stress eating, having panic attacks, drinking or shopping, or behaving erratically or self-harming, right? And that's important that we know the side effects of passive anger, because a lot of people think that passive anger is less vicious or less harming than, say, volatile anger. But it's important that we know that passive anger has the ability, the capacity to boil up, right? It's kind of like boiling water. It bubbles and it bubbles, and then it will start to pop just as much as volatile anger. It might even be even worse sometimes, right? Because it's been settling for so long. But like I said, passive anger is like, okay, you normally do the dishes, I'm not doing the dishes tonight. Or you normally kiss your husband before you go to bed, I'm not kissing him tonight. Or, you know, you go to your mom's house and you spend the whole time on your phone, right? Because you're upset about something. And with this type of anger, it's important that there's the communication piece, like Nancy was talking about, right? Are we communicating our needs? Are we expressing our emotions, right? Making sure there's a channel of communication going on in the relationship where you're able to express your emotions, right? Because the more we build up that passive aggression, it's going to turn into the volatile version, right? And then by then it's too far, because like it says, it leads to erratic behavior and self-harming and things like that. So definitely look out for that one, and take it just as serious as volatile anger. So volatile anger, this is a type of anger that is the opposite. And with volatile anger, you know you're mad, right? It's very evident. And so does everyone else. This kind of anger is often explosive and unpredictable. It can easily spiral out of control. It leads to words and actions that you immediately regret. Once the storm has passed, just as with passive anger, denial and repression are often at the heart of the volatile anger as well, right? So instead of leaking out in small, often unrecognizable ways like passive anger, this one is one that makes itself heard. It's very loud, it's very clear, right? And a lot of these, we also have to know that you want to look at, you know, your childhood as well. How was anger expressed to you in your childhood? What makes it the difference between, you know, I'm going to keep it to myself, I'm not going to express my needs, and then over the other version, which is overstepping other people's needs and letting it out and not giving any sort of interest to how that other person's boundaries or needs might be, right? So it's important that we know the difference between the two, but also know that they're just as serious as the other, because one can lead to the other, right? Okay, next one, please. Okay, reasons we might get angry. It's important that we understand some of the psychology behind anger, right? Because it is an emotion that we all express and we all experience, to kind of understand some of the things that might lead to us reaching that threshold of anger, right? Because it's a threshold that gets us there, and we might explode over our capacity once we reach that place. So fear is one of the ones on the list. So it could be fear of losing a connection with a loved one, or losing maybe a good grade that you have, or a strong relationship, right? So out of fear that can also trigger our anger. Frustration. So maybe you're working on a task, right? This is something that you're usually good at, but it's taking you hours to figure out how to fix this problem or something, right? Frustration. That's another way that we might get to the point of anger. Sorry? Did someone say something? No? Okay. Yeah, frustration, right? The next one would be pain. And when we think about pain, you want to think about not only physical pain, but also psychological pain. So that kind of leads into overwhelm, right? Because psychological pain will get us into that overwhelm, right? So we're talking about things like anxiety, depression, alcoholism, ADHD, anything that kind of overwhelms the nervous system, right? That gets us to the point where we're already close to capacity, right? Now, so every little thing that comes our way in the day might make it even harder for us to be able to calm or soothe our anger or be rational, because we're already in so much pain, right? It's really hard to take perspective when you're in pain, right? And that doesn't make it fair to anyone, but that's why we're here to kind of learn more about it, and be able to address that before it even happens, and get to some of those root causes, right? If it's depression or some type of addiction that's making your threshold so small, then making sure that's being addressed before we even talk about anger, right? Because there's a lot other things going on right now that's leading to the anger. Disrespect, right? And this could be actual or perceived disrespect, doesn't matter what it is. You have a level of treatment that you feel like you deserve, and someone's not giving that to you, or anything that's not going the way to what you feel like you deserve, right? There might be a level of disrespect, and that could also lead to anger. These two at the bottom, these are more instrumental in the way that they can be used, right? So how we might use anger. So for adrenaline rush, it might be, that surge that we get of adrenaline when we're angry, right? It gives you kind of that boost of energy, that boost of confidence, the boost of, I don't really care what happens, right? I'm going to do this anyways, right? And some people might get addicted to that feeling, right? It might be like, it's actually useful. It's useful. It gives me that burst of energy that I need to conquer these problems. But it's important that we know that just because you're energized doesn't mean it's positive energy, right? And there are other ways in which we could use anger in a positive way. So it's important to know that that's not a cycle that you want to go down, right? Manipulation, right? And this is the one that we see in a lot of intimate dynamics, whether it be family or it be relationships, where people might use their anger as a way to get what they want, right? There might be some people who feel that when they're angry, it makes them feel a little bit tougher, makes them feel stronger, bigger, and things get done, right? When I get angry, I'm not questioned. When I get angry, things are done immediately, right? So it's important to understand why some people might use anger, right? Because they might not know how to express themselves in a way that gets things done. So they feel like they have to do that, which becomes a manipulation tactic, right? So it's important that we're also not doing that as well, that we know how to express our emotions and connect with our more vulnerable emotions instead of having to resort to anger to get things done. Excuse me. Okay, next one, please.
Sure. Janelle, I just had a question for you.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
in regards to, all the feelings underneath the iceberg, underneath the water,
Yes. Yeah.
um, do you feel like boundaries can help in
Mhm.
this instance of, um, securing these things or not allowing these things to, affect us as emotionally as they could?
Mhm. And that's the you're a little bit ahead of me because that's the next slide, which
Mhm.
we're going to talk about boundaries. Um, but yeah, some of these things are going to be based on how well you are to not only set up your boundaries but be able to follow them and stick to them, right? Have discipline, right? I like to say that our self-confidence comes from our ability to follow up on what we say we're going to do, right? So how disciplined am I when it comes to following up on my boundaries, right? That's very important because that's just going to become a cycle back into anger if we feel insecure, if we're not following up on what we say we're going to do. So yeah, that kind of leads into my next slide. Okay. Okay, so boundary setting. Strong boundaries help us to protect our time, our energy, and our physical and mental health. So it makes sense that we feel angry when they're violated. But oftentimes our boundaries are unclear or they're fuzzy, or we negotiate them without conscious awareness because we're tempted to give into our impulses or we don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable, right? So this is why we need to practice self-awareness and we need to recognize which boundaries we've allowed to be crossed and why, right? So boundary setting is very, very important, right? Because like in the previous slide, when we talked about passive aggression, the boundary setting comes in with that where we might be letting others overstep our boundaries for so long, right? Or we might not be following up on boundaries we set for ourselves for so long that, like I said, the water starts to boil and then it starts to pop because we haven't been listening to the rules that we set for ourselves, right? So that's very important. So in maintaining our boundaries, there's certain questions we want to ask ourselves, right? Is this an internal or an external boundary, right? So internal boundaries have to do with the boundaries that I make with myself of how I'm going to interact with the world, right? And external boundaries are more of the boundaries that I've put on other people. And the rule I like to go by is that your internal boundaries should always be more than your external boundaries because we have more control on our internal lives than we do on our outside lives, right? So it only makes more sense to set more boundaries on yourself, what's within your control, right? So an external boundary would maybe be, oh, I don't like when you speak and you're too close to me, right? When you're in my personal space, right? That's an external boundary. But if we want to change an external boundary to an internal boundary, then maybe you want to say, if someone comes within 6 feet of me, right? That's pretty far, but let's just say, right? I'm gonna go in the other direction. I'm gonna walk away. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go in my car, right? What that does is it gives you back the power in the situation, right? Now, I'm not waiting for that person. And like Nancy said, communication as well, right? So if I kept communicating it to that person and they keep disrespecting my boundaries, then I'm going to create an internal boundary, right? Maybe I don't want to be around that type of person anymore. Or maybe every time that person comes, I'm just going to leave, right? That's your internal boundary. You're setting a new standard for yourself that has nothing to do with them, right? The way they react is just like you already have a set standard of what you're going to do after. Um, did I let myself down or did I not hold up a boundary with someone else? I don't I don't like to hear that when someone says, did I let myself down? Right? The second half of that I like where is like, or did I not hold up a boundary with someone else? Right? That sounds more like something that's actionable, something that we're able to maneuver and fix or look at how we can do differently. Right? So it's important to see when and where we're holding up our boundaries and analyze that so we're able to continue to respect them, right? So you want to ask yourselves like questions like, why did I not maintain this boundary? How did neglecting it negatively impact me, right? Is this a boundary I want to have? You know, is it time to set a new boundary? You know, maybe it's time to get rid of that boundary. Maybe you've evolved, or maybe there's a new thing that's more pressing for you now, right? So analyzing that as well. Or is there something I need to change to address to better maintain this boundary? Right? Maybe you move to a new place, or you have new friends, or your family of what they went to therapy and they're different now. So maybe the boundaries are going to change over time, right? If internal, what is the purpose of this boundary? Is it in alignment with who I want to be? Right? We always want to make sure that our boundaries are in alignment with who we want to be, what we value, what our goals are in life, right? Because that makes it just easier when something comes up in your life, you're able to say, okay, I value this over this, so this is where my boundary lies, right? It's important that we know what we value, we know what our goals are, what we're heading towards, because that will help us maintain healthy boundaries. If it's external, have I communicated my boundaries, right? Like Nancy said, communication, key. Have I communicated my boundaries clearly to this person? What kind of things can I say to them of my boundaries when they start to cross that line, right? Starting to understand how we can communicate those things to people, right? Because I don't want to get you in a place where you set up so many boundaries that you're isolated. So communication is also key, right? And it might look different with each person, right? Take a moment to get to know the people around you and how you might be able to communicate, you know, boundaries to them. And like I said, if they don't understand, then there's other options. Next slide, please.
Sure. I love the piece, Janelle, about setting the boundaries and also thinking about the things that you can say to set those boundaries.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you don't have those boundaries already in place, you get into the triggering moment and you almost feel uncomfortable, right? And you're kind of in that state where you're now dealing with the emotions, however it may show up, whether it be anger or frustration, right? And in that moment, thinking of the words to express your boundaries becomes really difficult. So I love that you have this question here that before you're presented with these triggering moments to think about what your boundaries are and also ways that you can communicate them, and kind of give yourself the tools that you need when you are feeling all of those emotions.
Yeah, so it's something that's kind of preemptive, right? That you're planning for when an issue might arise, but it's also something where you also analyze and see what went wrong as well, right? We don't want to be hard on ourselves. We want to have self-compassion because this is a learning process. This is something that, you know, you're going to set it and find out, okay, that one doesn't work. Let me try something else, right? So it's important that you go into it with the mentality of, I'm trying to find the right fit for me. What does that look like for me? Right. So yeah, that like you said, making sure that you do it before the concern arises, right? Because it makes it easier for us because we already know where our boundaries lie.
For sure. And also just making a point that, these are some of the things that can also be brought up within therapy and can be communicated, being able to have that safe space to communicate those boundaries or, kind of bounce ideas off and things like that as well.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. That's a good addition. Yes. Therapy is a great place for that, right? Or even with the experiment of boundaries, right? How about we try that or we try this? What do you think would be, you know, a good thing to try next, right? To have someone, like Nancy said, to bounce those ideas off, or when you have challenges, someone to come back to and kind of, you know, plan together again with, right? That's a good place to start for sure. Okay, triggers. So now we're going to talk a little bit about triggers. So we could define this as thoughts that can trigger anger, which can include personal assessments, assumptions, evaluations, or interpretations of situations that makes people think that someone else is attempting, consciously or not, to hurt them, right? In this sense, anger is a social emotion. You always have a target that's you always have a target that your anger is directed against, even if that target is yourself. So feelings of pain combined with anger triggering thoughts motivate you to take action, face threats, and defend yourself by striking out against the target you think is causing you pain, right? So we can think with evolutionary psychology, this would have been beneficial back in the day, right? When we were like out in the wild with the animals and there was real threat and danger to our safety, right? It's important that like if something triggers our safety, we're able to just react quickly. So we're able to get out of danger, or we're able to, fight an animal that might be about to kill us, right? That was important then. But now when we're like a little bit more civilized and, in the social society, it's important that we are managing our triggers, that we're understanding what is triggering us and how to soothe that so we don't cause further harms to ourselves or to others. Next one. Right, so maybe your trigger is when someone borrows a belonging without returning it, right? Maybe you know in your head, that's a trigger for me. Or maybe when people say insulting words to you. Or maybe I've realized that there's this one specific person that always triggers me, right? It could be an uncle that you rarely see. Maybe you see him at Christmas. Or it could be a friend from high school, right? Someone that you don't see a lot but triggers you. And maybe people that you see a lot trigger you as well. And that's another topic of discussion, right? Because you don't want to be around your trigger all the time. So it's important that we have a running list of the things or people that trigger us so we can work on managing our exposure and create plans for when we come into contact with that trigger. So here I have some common triggers as well on the presentation. But like I was saying, right, if you know that, it's Uncle Tom or someone like that, whatever, that comes and that's the person that triggers you, making sure that when he comes, say he's playing cards on the dining room table, right? Maybe you want to go to the kitchen with your mom and cook something, or you want to go out back and talk to your sister, right? Trying to reduce your contact with your trigger. And if that's not possible, maybe it's time to go home. Maybe you're going to call it short today and meet up with some other family members tomorrow, right? There's always a way to get out of the situation when you're with your trigger, right? So make sure you mediate that risk before it even gets to a sticky situation. So some of the common triggers might be that we get triggered, and this is like overall as humans, right? Injustice is something that triggers us. Disrespect, violation of our personal space, abusive language, labeling, shaming, blaming, physical threats, insults, misinformation, lying, relationship disputes, constant disappointment, lack of control, and like I said, some individuals exclusively. So some specific people, right? Some people, when you're around them, it just gets your blood boiling. So make sure that you reduce your amount of contact that you have to people like that if you're struggling with managing your anger. Next slide, please. The causes of anger can vary, and it can be triggered by external factors such as bullying, what can I speak right now? Humiliation and loss. Internal factors such as frustration or failure can also lead to anger. Anger is not always a reaction to a present circumstance. Sometimes a situation will unconsciously remind us of the past or past experience. A person may display a person may displace their anger about the past onto the present situation. Anger typically has less to do with an event and more with how a person reacts to that event. Certain negative thought patterns often precede an outburst of anger. And on the screen, these are some of the patterns that we might see, right? So there might be a lot of blaming, right? This is when a person claims negative events or emotions are always someone else's fault. Blaming others is often an attempt to avoid responsibility or shame, right? So we want to make sure that we're not doing blaming, right? We want to take accountability for our emotions, right? Saying I statements, right? I feel this way when you do this or that, right? That might be a better technique than blaming someone. Overgeneralizing, right? When a person gets caught up in the black and white thinking, the words always and never are common in this pattern. Overgeneralizing often makes a situation seem worse than it really is, right? So saying you always do that or you never do this, right? We get to generalizing and we forget the moments when people do that, or we put that person in a defensive mode, right? They're ready to fight now because you're generalizing about their behaviors. Rigidity. When a person is unable to reconcile what is happening with what they think should happen, the individual may have a low tolerance for frustration. Mind reading. When a person convinces themselves that another person intentionally hurt or disrespected them, the person may start hostility where there isn't any, right? So mind reading is kind of thinking that you know what the other person's intention and thoughts are when they haven't really communicated that with you, right? You're picking up on cues which might be wrong. It's always important to communicate with the person to know exactly what they're thinking or feeling if you have any concerns. Collecting straws. When a person mentally tallies things to justify their anger, they let small incidents build into their head until they reach the last straw. The person's anger then blows over in what people see as overreaction, right? And collecting straws, this sounds kind of like passive aggression, what I was telling you about, right? Keeping tally of these things, slowly building up and building up, thinking that it's under the rug, but one day it's just going to get pulled up and it's going to just explode, right? So it's always important that we address concerns as they come up and we don't pile them up, right? And if we're in a heated mood and we don't really want to address it right now, because sometimes that's the case, right? Sometimes we feel like our emotions is not in a stable place where we're able to talk about a concern with a partner or someone close to us. Maybe we need a minute, maybe we need a day, maybe we need a breather, maybe we need, some time to relax and come back and talk about it. That's okay. But also making sure that we come back to it, make sure that it's always being addressed. Next, please. So this chart is a good little representation of anger as a secondary emotion, right? So we hear that a lot where we hear, oh, anger is a secondary emotion. And what people mean when they say that is that there's usually like the iceberg that we saw earlier that Nancy pointed out. There's usually so many other emotions that are underneath our anger, right? There's usually so much other things that's going on, so many more vulnerable emotions or primary emotions. So in the blue box, things such as joy, fear, sadness, shame, disappointment, helplessness, hopelessness, despair, inadequacy, or worthlessness, right? These are some of those primary emotions. These are more vulnerable emotions, right? So say there was an event trigger, like in the picture, and then our primary emotions were activated, right? There's two options that we can go. So the healthier way would be if we're able to emotionally connect with someone, right? And then it goes down to primary emotion lead us to intimacy, right? So if we're able to take those primary emotions and connect with someone, share those emotions with someone, or connect with those emotions, then it leads us more to seek connection. It pulls us towards other people, brings us closer to intimacy, right? We're able to ask for what we really want, what we need. That puts us in a bonded position with other people, right? If we're able to pick the right people to be vulnerable like that and open up. And then there's the other way that we could go with those emotions, which is if you're too overwhelmed or you feel unsafe, then you're more likely to take this route, right? Which lead us into our secondary emotions, which is more of the anger, the hatred, the numb, the shutdown. This is a narrow and rigid view of emotions here. Protective, it keeps you from experiencing your primary emotions. So this is almost like an instant block, right? Every time you try to express, okay, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling overwhelmed, stressed, I'm feeling worthless today, right? All of a sudden there comes the anger, right? You don't get the time to actually process and sit in that emotion, which could lead us to intimacy and better connections, right? And then when we take that secondary route and we go down a little bit more over here into this red box here, we see that it actually starts to create a cycle. Because guess what happens when we start getting angry, we start shutting down, we start numbing out, is that we're actually going to push people away from us, right? And that's going to create a cycle because for many people, right, that's a trigger for them, right? And that becomes back at the start. We're at the trigger event again. Because guess what? We're pushing people away. And now we're feeling worthless. Now we're feeling insecure. Nobody likes me, right? Feelings and thoughts like that, which puts us back to the trigger and we go all over it over and over again, right? Because we're not letting our emotions out. We're not connecting here and being vulnerable. And that is very important, right? On the side here, when we think about, why is anger used as a cover? I mentioned a little bit before, but we might want to start unpacking, our past, unpacking some of the family dynamics, unpacking some of, the ways we grew up and how that is carried over into who we are now, right? And we see this expressed a lot in our relationships because our childhood dynamics love to show up in our relationships, right? So how is the way that I was brought up, right? Was anger something that was expressed? What happens when someone gets angry in the family? What type of events would occur, right? That's important that you understand how your idea of anger was shaped. Societal expectations or gender roles, right? It's important to understand what the roles that you've been taught, how has that shaped your view of anger, or how you feel like, can I express these feelings or not? Right? It's important that you know what type of constraints are put on the emotions that you do have, and knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to feel your emotions, right? Because you don't want to get stuck in that other cycle over there where you keep getting triggered and keep getting mad and keep pushing people away. And similar to the gender roles for looking weak, right? Some people don't want to look weak, don't want to look vulnerable. Maybe people are going to take advantage of me, or if people see me look weak, then they're going to change the way that they look at me, or, I see a lot of that more where people are concerned of looking weak than what it might look like when you throw a chair or when you start snapping or when you're giving attitude, right? So it's important that you start actually analyzing some of those thoughts and putting it up for scrutiny to look at it, right? So fear of looking weak, angry might give the sense of control, right? Like I said in previous slides, it might make you feel more big or strong or more confident in the way that you move. But it's important to know that keeping anger under control is better than feeling a sense of control, right? Because you might feel a sense of control, but you're out of control. Right? So actually being in control over anger is the ultimate control that you can have over it. And that leads us to our next slide, which is uncontrollable.
Sorry,
Okay, go
Janel,
ahead.
I just wanted to express how much I really like this chart and how it really shows the dynamics between being vulnerable and showing up those emotions, the underlying emotions.
Yes.
And then also showing how it can be received and what are the intentions of being vulnerable, building connections with others, and bringing closeness and intimacy, which I think between the blue box and the orange box, it says if too overwhelming or feels unsafe.
Yes.
So the feeling unsafe it stands out to me and kind of connects back to family environment or upbringing and your experiences, because there may be, a pattern of feeling unsafe when being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that then does not create that intimacy with that particular person. But in the end, it does still, in the green box, it does still say, ask for what we really want or need. So sometimes, you do walk away with at least knowing that you were being true to yourself and being honest with yourself and self-aware and being able to communicate that. And I'd like to point out as well that it's the result that you may get in that particular situation may not be the same result when you approach somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So also, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's very important. Bringing that family dynamic back into it. And like you said earlier, therapy or just self-exploration in a matter of fact, if you're not able to do therapy, but just being able to explore that more, like you said, just because I was triggered in the past and I was conditioned to think that this is what happens when anger occurs, doesn't mean it's going to happen in this relationship, right? Doesn't mean the emotions have to be played out that same way again.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. Uncontrolled versus controlled anger, right? So like I was saying at the start of the presentation, that anger can be controlled, and when it is controlled, it's actually a good force to have in your life, right? We don't want to completely get rid of any of our emotions because they serve us a purpose, right? They're here for a reason. When we look on the uncontrolled side of anger, we see the things that it can lead to loss of employment, loss of, family connections, or you can even end up in prison, right? Individuals who cannot get a grip on their disruptive aggressive behaviors are likely to suffer not only increased risk for health problems, but serious social problems as well, right? So not only are you risking the safety of others, you're also risking the safety of yourself, right? Because it can also cause problems within yourself, right? You might end up in the hospital quicker than you might want to because you're not learning how to control your anger. So on the other side is the controlled anger, right? And we see the picture of the people at the protest fighting for something they believe in, right? Fighting for a better tomorrow. And that's very important because when anger is controlled, it's actually a very, very strong force that can cause a lot of change, whether in your life or in the social or political or justice system, any type of system or any type of thing that you're trying to challenge, right? Maybe it's a goal, right? Maybe you're angry that you weren't able to make something, right? And that might give us that passion and that drive to be able to keep going, right? Anger can be used as a fuel. So some of the other ways that we can be like, anger is designed to promote survival. Anger and its discharge can be calming sometimes. Anger provides a sense of control. Anger energizes us. Anger motivates us to solve problems. Anger makes us aware of injustice, like in the picture. Anger drives us towards our goals. Anger protects our values and our beliefs, right? So it's important that those are protected. So anger can do that as well with our boundaries, right? Next one, please. So when we look at aggression versus assertion, right? It's important that we can recognize the difference between the two so we know when we're crossing that line, right? Because like I said, it's beneficial to you, but making sure that you're using it the right way. So when we look at aggression on this side, on our left side, we can see aggression is standing up for rights while denying others of theirs, right? So you're standing up for your rights, but you're also denying others of theirs. You're not thinking about others, no feelings for others. You play the blame game. Like we said, you always or you never, generalizing, no change, negative attitude and no effort expended, right? Other than the aggression, there's no effort to solve the actual problem. And then on the other side, right, on a more positive note, then there's assertion, right, which is, it looks more like standing up for your rights without denying others of theirs. And that's the important part, right? When we're about to use our anger, are we denying someone else of their rights? Are we crossing someone else's boundary? It's important that we leave a room for everyone to be assertive, right? Everyone to be able to express their feeling, that we're not taking over the whole space, right? Everyone's able to express themselves, right? You're able to pause, think, and choose, right? This is something that's more of a response rather than a reaction, right? Aggression is more of a reaction, right? Something happened to me and I have to do this. I need to do this right now. Assertion is something more where we pause, we think, and we choose, right? This would make more sense to do this. This would make more sense to do this, right? Where you still have passion in you, but you have time to calm down and make it a little bit more rational. Using statements like I feel, right? So taking accountability of your feelings. Flip the coin, do unto other as you would like done to you, right? Like we said, making sure we're not denying others of their rights. We're not, overstepping our boundaries with others. There's change, right? Because you have that time to slow down and think, you can change. You can be like, okay, this is not what needs to be done here. This is what needs to be done. You're rational, right? Your vocabulary is going to look different. Your attitude is going to look different. And it's going to take work, right? It's not just, I get angry and then I get what I want. No, assertion takes time. It takes time to pause, to think and choose and get to know your audience and get to know how you feel, connect with that, right? To relay an information to who you're talking to or whatever you're trying to get done, right? Putting in that work instead of just being aggressive. Okay, next one. Okay, anger warning signs are the clues your body gives you that your anger is starting to grow. When you learn to spot your warning signs, you can begin to address your anger while it's still weak, right? So when your anger is in this stage, this is the best stage, other than planning to make sure we don't get here. This is the best stage to catch your anger, right? So that it doesn't get any stronger, that you're able to take that breather or step away for a bit. So some of those symptoms you might see an increased heart rate. You might see a dramatic increase in the breathing rate. Unconscious tensing of muscles, especially in the face and in the neck, right? You might want to do some progressive muscle relaxation or some breathing exercises at this point. Your veins becoming visible due to an increase in blood pressure, dryness in the mouth and throat, teeth grinding, changed facial coloring. Most commonly, the face turns red, but can become pale as well. Sweating, feeling hot or cold, shaking in the hands, feeling a surge of power due to the release of adrenaline, right? So these are some of the symptoms. It's important that you look at this list, and like Nancy said, it's very subjective, right? The way I experience it and the way you experience it is going to be very different. So it's important that you look at this list and you said, you know what? This one and this one is the ones I know when I'm about to get mad. I'm about to get angry, right? So you know specifically what your physiological presentation is of anger. So you know it as a warning sign when you're getting angry. Okay, next one. Expressing, suppressing, and calming, right? People use a variety of both conscious and unconscious processes to deal with their anger. The three main approaches are expressing, suppressing, and calming. Expressing your anger feels like assertiveness, like I've mentioned, not aggressiveness. A manner in which the healthiest way to express your anger, right? To do this, you have to learn how to make clear what your needs are and how to get them met without hurting others. Being assertive doesn't mean being pushy or demanding. It means being respectful of yourself and of others. Anger can be suppressed as well and then converted or redirected. This happens when you hold in on your anger. Stop thinking about it and focus on something positive, The aim is to inhibit or suppress your anger and convert it into something more constructive. The danger in this type of response, though, is that if it isn't allowed outward expression, your anger can turn inward on yourself. Anger turned inward may cause hypertension, high blood pressure, or depression, right? Amongst other things. So it's important to know that suppression is a quick little tool to use if you need, like, say you're at work and you're about to explode, maybe you want to wait till you go home to hit the gym, right? Something like that. It's not something that you want to, anger is not something you want to hold on to for a long period of time, for a long amount of time, right? Because then that's going to turn external. Maybe the next day when you show up at work, you might have an explosion on your boss, or you might go home and have an explosion on your wife, right? Or your husband. Or it might turn internally where the anger is now self-hate and you might want to self-harm or hurt yourself. And it's important that we make sure that does not happen, right? So making sure we address, and if we need to suppress, we do it for a short period of time just to get out of a situation if we need to get out of it. Finally, you can calm down inside. This means just controlling your outward behavior, but also controlling your internal responses. So taking steps to lower your heart rate, calm yourself, and let the feelings subside, right? So in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about calming techniques. But just to look at the picture up here in the right, we have awareness, control, and expression. So awareness, like we said, what are my triggers? What are my psychological symptoms? What are the things I know about my childhood, right? That contribute to my triggers. What is my boundary setting looking like, right? Awareness, self-awareness to be specific, right? Getting awareness of yourself and also your surroundings, right? Can prevent the suppression, right? It gives you that red alert to be able to know that, okay, the anger is coming, or this is something that usually causes me anger. So you're ahead of anger by just knowing what causes and what triggers it, right? Control, which is the awareness, helps you to be one step ahead of your emotions and make sure they don't escalate, right? And having that awareness does that. It gives you a sense of control. Control the process and find the best way to avoid doing any damage. And then expression. Find the best way to express your frustrations in a calm, gentle, and respectful manner. Take the time out if necessary before reopening the conversation, right? So like I said before, it's best to address it, but if you need that moment to take a moment to just relax and get back to it soon, that's fine as well. Okay, so the next slide, we're going to get into some calming and coping techniques. So breathing is always a good technique to use for anger. Deep breathing is a simple technique it's excellent for managing emotions. Not only is deep breathing effective, it's also discreet and it's an easy thing to use that you can use in any place at any time, right? So for this one, you want to sit comfortably and place one hand on your abdomen. Breathe in through your nose deeply enough that the hand on your abdomen rises. Hold the air in your lungs and then exhale slowly, right? Exhale slowly through your mouth, right? With your lips puckered as if you're blowing through a straw. The secret is to go slow. Time the inhalation for 4 seconds, pause for 4 seconds, and exhalation for 6 seconds. Practice that for 3 to 5 minutes. This is one technique. This is one breathing technique. So it's important to know that there are many different ones out there, right? A quick Google search and you can find plenty of breathing exercises. But the importance is that you have the right technique and you're breathing properly from your abdomen, and that you're just going slowly and taking that time, having patience, right? 3 to 5 minutes of just breathing. And that's one technique that you could use. Next one. So the next one is an anger log. it's very important that we keep log of our emotions, identifying them and when they happened, when they happen. So not just for anger, but for any other emotion that you might be trying to regulate, anger diary or a diary for whatever your emotion is. It's important so that you can keep track of it. So questions that you might want to ask is, what was happening before the anger episode, right? Describe how you were feeling and what was on your mind. Were you hungry, tired, or stressed? That's important because that can cause anger as well. Describe the facts of what happened. What events triggered your anger, right? So my mom said this, or my sister said this, or I was really stressed about this test, right? What was happening before the anger happened? How did you react, and how did your reaction change as the event continued to unfold, right? So this gives you a chance to kind of look into how your boundary setting or maybe your coping mechanisms are holding up, right? Were they realistic? Were you able to take that walk, or were you able to do the breathing exercise, right? Starting to understand if it's actually holding up, the techniques that you're using, right? Reflection is important. What were your thoughts and feelings during the anger episode? Looking back, do you see anything differently than when you were in the heat of the moment, right? So when you're in the heat of the moment, your thoughts might be cloudy, you're not as rational. Now looking back at the moment, what does it look like now to you, right? And that's good because it helps us to separate anger from ourselves, right? Because you're a person who experiences anger. You're not an angry person. It's important that we don't say things like that to ourselves, right? You're experiencing anger. It's an emotion. You're just experiencing it. Next one, please. Using diversions. So maybe you just need to take some time away, right? So the goal of a diversion is to buy yourself some time. If you can distract yourself for just 30 minutes, you'll have a better chance of dealing with your anger in a healthy way. Remember, you can always return to the source of your anger later. You're just setting the problem aside for now. So similar to suppression, diversion is the same, right? With this one, we're being a little bit more intentional about diverting our attention, right? So maybe here's a list of things. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's reading a book, playing a sport, doing a craft, writing in your journal, taking a long bath, playing an instrument you haven't picked up in a while, going swimming, playing with your pet, cleaning your room. I'm sure there's a list of things that you've been putting off that you could use it as a diversion. And this gives you time for your body, like we said, those physiological symptoms to kind of calm down, or expressions to calm down, so you have the time to healthily communicate in the situation that triggered you. Next, please. Similarly, taking a timeout is also a breather, right? Stepping away from the situation. And these are usually very useful in intimate relationships, whether family members or relationships. So with your partner or another person, plan exactly how the timeouts will work. Everyone should understand the rationale behind the timeouts. And this is an opportunity to cool down and not to avoid the problem. What will you both do during this timeout? That's important, right? Talk to the other person and figure out what you're both going to do during that time, right? You might plan activities that are different. You might be in different rooms or different places, making sure that you're separated. Some of those things from the last slide might be something that you guys want to do, but separately, right? One person is going to go clean while the other person is going for a walk, right? We don't want to be doing the same thing. What will you do? Plan to return to the problem in 30 minutes to an hour. Important problems shouldn't be ignored forever, but nothing good will come from an explosive argument. Exactly. So that's what I've been saying, right? Finding that right balance in between taking a break and coming back to communicate, because both are very, very important. Okay. This is the last slide before I wrap up. But let's talk about constructive anger, right? Or assertion, being more assertive, right? Like we said, Anger gives us motivation. It pushes us to fix what we see as wrong in the world. It's useful in life and death situations, and in managing the intensity is what is key, right? And we want to make sure that we feel it and we don't repress it. And then we have our beautiful little diagram of from passive, assertive to aggressive, right? So like we said, aggressive and passive they're still dangerous anger to carry around with us, right? So we want to be somewhere in the middle where we want to be assertive, right? And we can see on the passive side, being too nice, guilt, feeling powerless, things like that. On the aggressive side, mean, rigid boundaries, exploding. And then in the assertive, this is where we want to be, right? So we want something that's firm, it delivers the message clearly, using I statements, the broken record method, which is the method of repeating yourself over again, like how children do that when they want something, they keep asking for it. Being that way with people, right? When they keep saying, do you want to come? No. Do you want to come? No. Making sure that you don't change up your boundaries because someone is trying to guilt trip you, right? Saying no, thank you, and then keep saying it over and over again. Exactly. And having good boundaries. Like we've covered that. Good. So on to our final slide, right? Let's talk about some of our takeaways from the seminar. So to take control of our anger in our everyday life, it is important that we consider many of the topics discussed in this seminar, right? Our unmet needs, what need is not being met, right? Whether it's safety or belonging, what do I feel threatened by? Once we understand our needs, we start to understand our triggers as well, right? Making sure we're fully aware of them and we have a plan for when avoiding them is not an option. Respecting our boundaries to ourselves and holding people to that same standard as well. Leading with compassion for ourselves and forgiving ourselves when we make a mistake, right? Readjusting our boundaries. It's okay if you mess up. Just make sure you go back to the drawing board and figure out what happened. Understanding what I've been taught about anger, like Nancy said, right? Going back to childhood, right? Maybe you want to talk to a therapist or just self-reflect, right? Write in your journal, find some ways to connect with yourself again. Whether in my family or the ideologies that I've created, whether from society or what I think about anger, how that reflects in the way I demonstrate anger. What do I wish to express in this moment? How can I express it assertively instead of aggressively? And if I feel out of control, do I have some coping mechanisms in my backpack to be able to pull out, to be able to cope in a situation if it gets too overwhelming? That's important as well. How can I express myself authentically and not out of reacting, right? So like we said, we want to respond instead of react. Instead of letting anger take control in the next stressful or triggering situation, spend some time to calm and analyze the situation to make sure we are responding versus reacting. And that is it. Next slide. Any questions? Any question, guys? Do you have any questions, Nancy?
Just thank you so much for that. It was insightful. And I did have a few questions just in regards to the diversions. Definitely, keeping yourself busy, but also, can this also be looked at as a sense of self-care in terms of, you mentioned being intentional. So I'm thinking, can it be being intentional about doing something for myself, something that makes me feel good?
And that's the thing, right? There's self-care and then there's diversion, and I guess it is self-care as well, right? Because if you're going to the gym, going for a walk, that's also self-care, right? But the difference is that it comes with, say, a time limit on it, right? So I'm going for this walk for 30 minutes. And once I come back, then I'm going to be talking to my partner about that topic I've been avoiding, right? So there's more of a time limit on it where you're setting it up for a certain amount of time before I come back, right? That's a difference, but it still is self-care in itself. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great distinction that, you know, when you're dealing with those emotions of anger, knowing that, yes, I will do something that is, you know, considered as self-care, but not necessarily to completely take away from that, those emotions, and to come back to them. And I guess my other question would be, in terms of that time limit, you know, would you say 30 minutes to an hour is a healthy time limit? I know some people prefer a day or want to sleep on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like you said, anger is very subjective, right? There's some people they just need 15 minutes, and some people need 30 minutes to an hour. Some people need the whole day. And like you said, some people need to sleep and get back up, right? So it's important that you know which type of person that is for like you, which one are you, right? It's important that you know and you connect to that and be realistic with yourself, right? So if you know you're the type of person that needs a whole night's sleep before you're calm again and rational to talk, making sure that you take that time and don't say, oh, I just need an hour, right? Maybe you do need a day. Maybe you need to go for that walk, but you also need to go get your nails done and do some cleaning and add some other things to that list, right? And then go to sleep and wake back up on it. It's important to know that as well. That's a good question.
Thanks, Janelle. That was a great presentation or seminar.
I see some things in the comment. Let me check this out. Okay. Thank you so much. No problem, guys. Yeah, I'm happy it was informative. I'm happy that it was helpful to you guys. Okay. Yes, thank you. Are there any handouts? I think this video is going to be posted. So hopefully you guys are able to go over and rewatch if you want. I don't know the date it's going to be reposted, but hopefully soon. Nancy, can you go to the next slide, please, to put the contact information, please?
Sure.
Yeah. So that's some of the contact information if you need to reach out to One Piece, or you know, you want to book a session, or you want to find out when the information will be released. So that's the email that you can use. Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys coming and even interacting in the chat. I had a lot of fun making it, and I'm very happy that you guys enjoyed the presentation. Yeah. So if there's no, yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
No, I was just going to thank everybody for joining. It was a great seminar.
Yeah. So if there's no more questions or concerns, also feel free to reach out to the email or call the number on the screen if you have any inquiries for One Piece or on this presentation. It was really good to be here and do this for you guys. Yeah.
Thank you again, Janelle, for such a great presentation and giving us further insight on how to control our emotions, and also how to communicate and cope with the feelings of anger that come in triggering moments. And you also brought up a really good point in terms of self-awareness. And I think that's definitely a key factor. So thanks to everyone who participated and added their input in the chat. This video will be available on the One Piece YouTube channel to be reviewed, and if you wanted to go back and see any of the content. So take care, everyone, and have a great day.